In the sterile, wood-paneled quiet of the federal bankruptcy court in Denver, my younger sister Ashley had hired a slick lawyer to methodically dismantle my life's work and prove I was destitute. My parents, playing their roles to perfection, testified that they had given me every possible advantage in life. My mother, Margaret Miller, began to weep on cue, a staged performance of maternal grief. My father, Robert Miller, simply nodded his grave agreement, his expression a mask of weary disappointment. My lawyer, Jessica Vance, remained a picture of absolute composure, until Judge Henderson finally set down his papers, paused, and declared, "I have thoroughly reviewed all submitted asset and tax records. It has become clear to me that someone in this courtroom is actively lying to my face. We gave you every chance, and you wasted it all." That was the narrative my mother, Margaret, was selling with her dramatic sobs, dabbing at her perfectly dry eyes with a silk handkerchief that probably cost more than my first car. The entire courtroom watched her performance in a hushed silence. Beside her, my father, Robert, sat with his jaw clenched, a picture of calculated sorrow. His lawyer was meticulously laying out a stack of documents, the foundation of their claim that I owed my little sister Ashley $1.5 million. My name is Sarah Hayes. I am the founder and CEO of Summit Geo Solutions, and today I was the defendant, sitting in a simple but impeccably tailored suit with Jessica next to me. She was an anchor of calm in the storm my family had manufactured. Ashley's lawyer stood up, his voice resonating with manufactured confidence. He argued that my company was teetering on the brink of collapse, completely incapable of repaying a substantial investment Ashley had made on behalf of the family years ago. He claimed this was an internal family agreement, authorized by our parents, and that the court's intervention was now essential to protect her rights as a creditor. The room seemed to lean in collectively. I glanced over at Ashley. She sat ramrod straight, a faint, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. And then, the tide turned. Judge Henderson abruptly stopped reading the petition. He took off his glasses, leaned in to scrutinize the newly submitted financial records more closely, and then looked up, his gaze sweeping over my family's legal team. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. "I've reviewed the asset and tax records. Someone in this courtroom is lying to my face." Ashley's self-assured smile evaporated. My mother's theatrical tears stopped as if a faucet had been turned off. My father froze, his carefully constructed mask of disappointment cracking. I just sat there, my heart beating a steady rhythm, waiting for this exact moment. A moment I had been preparing for over the last 12 years. Have you ever had someone you love, a close family member, try to diminish your success or even actively sabotage what you've built from the ground up? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and it helps to know you're not alone. And please like and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this story, because it's really just getting started. I stood there in that silent courtroom, feeling the weight of the last decade settle around me. The origins of this ugly confrontation were deeply rooted in our family home in Denver, Colorado, where the Miller name was synonymous with luxury real estate and high-end mountain development. My father, Robert Miller, was the head of the Miller Development Group, one of the most powerful firms in the region. He dealt in massive land acquisitions, exclusive resort projects, and the kind of multi-million-dollar deals that shaped the landscape of ski towns across the Rocky Mountains. He'd started with a small inheritance, but had an aggressive, almost ruthless ambition, turning family connections and sheer force of will into an empire. My mother, Margaret, managed a different kind of portfolio, our family's social standing. She chaired charity committees, organized lavish galas at the country club, and made sure the Miller name was a regular feature in the society columns. From the very beginning, my younger sister Ashley was the chosen one. Born 8 years after me, she was the baby of the family, and she basked in a spotlight of attention I never knew. My father would take her to business meetings and partner lunches. even when she was just a teenager. I vividly remember one summer when she was 17. He took her to a high-stakes negotiation at a downtown steakhouse, proudly introducing her to a table of seasoned executives as the future of the Miller Development Group. I can still hear them chuckling appreciatively. "This one's got the instinct," he'd boast, patting her hand. "She'll take this business further than I ever dreamed." He spared no expense in her grooming. Private tutors for her business courses, a brand new luxury convertible for her 18th birthday, and prime internships at the firm where she was his personal shadow. All the partners knew her by name. Dad ensured she sat in on the most critical strategy sessions, learning to read market trends for exclusive mountain properties. It was never subtle. He saw Ashley as the perfect successor, possessing the charm and ambition to carry on the family legacy without ever challenging his methods. I, on the other hand, had chosen a completely different road. After getting my undergraduate degree, I went to law school at the University of Colorado, naively thinking it would bring me closer to my father's world of contracts and land deals. But during my second year, I became completely captivated by sustainable technology. Specifically, I was fascinated by software that could monitor and protect vital mountain resources, like water tables and wildfire risks, in real time. I spent my nights buried in research, studying AI models that could track snowpack density, predict spring runoff, and analyze soil moisture to forecast wildfire danger. The potential was staggering. These were tools that could help federal agencies like the Bureau of Land Management make smarter, more sustainable decisions. When I was 26, I poured all of this passion into a comprehensive business plan for a company I called Summit Geo Solutions. I booked a formal meeting and presented it to my father in his magnificent corner office, which overlooked the entire city. The room smelled of old leather and his expensive cigars, with trophies from his biggest deals lining the polished mahogany shelves. I laid out everything: the market projections, the clear gap for precise resource monitoring in rugged terrain, and the potential for lucrative government contracts. He thumbed through the pages, a condescending chuckle escaping his lips about halfway through. "Sarah, this is a nice little hobby," he said, patting the glossy binder, "but it's a pipe dream. This kind of tech, it's not stable. It's not real. Stick to what we know. Real land, real assets." He leaned back in his enormous leather chair, gesturing at the empire around him. "Come work for the group, properly. You can support Ashley. She's the one who will inherit the core business. You can handle the legal side for us. Keep it all in the family." I tried to push back, explaining the growing demand driven by new environmental regulations and federal land management policies. "There's real money in this, Dad. Sustainable solutions are the future. This isn't just some experiment." His smile faded, replaced by that familiar, stern expression I knew so well. "You're throwing away a guaranteed future for some computer nonsense. Ashley understands the legacy. You should be helping her build it, not chasing these fantasies that are going to leave you broke." The discussion quickly escalated into an argument. My mother joined in, siding with him as she always did, her primary concern being appearances. "What will people think, Sarah? Our daughter dropping out of a promising legal career for some little startup." Ashley, who was home from college for the weekend, listened from the doorway, her expression a quiet, satisfied mask. She knew her position was unshakable. I finally stood my ground. "I'm not coming back to the firm just to play second fiddle to my little sister. I'm going to do this on my own." My father's final words were cold as ice. "Fine. But when this little project fails, and it will, you'll come crawling back. And when you do, you'll take whatever role Ashley is willing to offer you." I walked out of that office and out of that house with a resolve I didn't know I had. I swore I would never ask them for their approval or for a single dime ever again. The heavy front door closed behind me with a final, echoing thud that would reverberate through the years to come. I packed what little I owned into my beat-up sedan and drove toward the foothills just outside of Denver, where I rented a cramped one-bedroom apartment in a nondescript complex near the entrance to a canyon. The place was depressingly basic, with paper-thin walls and a kitchen straight out of the 1980s. But the view of the mountains from my small window was a constant reminder of why I was putting myself through this. The first month's rent consumed almost half of my meager savings, but the location was perfect, giving me direct access to the very terrain I aimed to protect. Those initial days and months blurred into a relentless cycle of work. I taught myself to code from the ground up, devouring online tutorials on Python, machine learning, and geospatial libraries. My nights were spent poring over dense federal regulations, Bureau of Land Management guidelines, and public land use policies that governed millions of acres across the West. My tiny apartment floor was constantly covered in stacks of printed documents, covered in my highlighter marks and scribbled notes as I built spreadsheets to model water runoff patterns using publicly available sensor data. My money disappeared with alarming speed. To make ends meet, I took on freelance gigs, writing dry environmental reports for small nonprofits, just to have enough to cover groceries and my internet bill. Coffee became my primary food group. Sleep became a luxury. The constant whir of my laptop's fan was the soundtrack to my life as I developed the first crude prototype, an app that could pull satellite imagery and ground sensor data to predict erosion risks on ski slopes. That prototype was everything. It was my one shot. I managed to connect with a guy on a founders forum who claimed to have deep connections with investors in the outdoor industry. We met at a coffee shop and he seemed incredibly enthusiastic, offering to co-develop the platform and introduce me to his funding network. In a moment of naive trust, I gave him access to the full code repository and all my detailed designs, sealing the deal with a handshake. For a few weeks, I was ecstatic. Then, radio silence. A month later, I saw my exact user interface and proprietary algorithms being launched under his new company name at a regional tech conference. He'd stolen everything, filed for a provisional patent using my work, and completely cut me out. My savings were nearly gone, and the theft left me with nothing but a handful of screenshots and emails, nothing legally binding. But I didn't quit. Fueled by a new, colder fury, I rewrote the entire core of the program from memory, and I made it better. I added more sophisticated machine learning layers to forecast water runoff and wildfire fuel conditions with greater accuracy. This was followed by months of intense isolation as I tested my new algorithms against historical BLM reports on flood and fire risks in the Rockies. I survived on instant noodles and pure, stubborn determination. I applied for every small grant aimed at women in STEM, but most of my applications were rejected due to my lack of a proven track record. The second major setback nearly broke me. By then, I had scraped together enough to hire a single part-time contractor and had actually secured a pilot project proposal with the regional BLM office in Colorado. The plan was to deploy my own custom-built sensors across a test area of public land near Vail, feeding real-time data into my platform to improve water allocation and wildfire forecasting models. I poured every last dollar I had into field testing. I spent that winter driving up treacherous canyon roads in blizzard conditions to install my prototypes, painstakingly calibrating them against official weather stations. The rejection arrived in a cold, formal letter. Insufficient on-site trial data over multiple seasons, and no independent verification of accuracy in variable mountain conditions. They praised the concept, but ultimately deemed it too early stage for a federal partnership. The very next day, my contractor quit for a stable job. The few angel investors I had lined up all pulled out. The bills piled up. My bank account balance dropped below $500. For the first time, sitting alone in that small, cold apartment, staring at an eviction notice, I allowed myself to wonder if my father had been right all along. That year, my mother sent her annual obligatory invitation to Thanksgiving dinner. "It's tradition," she had written. Exhausted and defeated, I decided to go, driving down from the mountains to the family home one last time. The dining table was, as always, a picture of elaborate perfection. The turkey was carved, and everyone was dressed in their holiday finest. The conversation remained painfully light and superficial until Ashley, home from her prestigious business school, turned to me with that practiced, condescending tone she'd already perfected. "So Sarah, how's the little tech project going? Dad says most of those startups crash and burn within the first couple of years." Her words landed with surgical precision, a deliberate jab in front of the entire family. I looked around the table. No one came to my defense. They just waited politely, expectantly for my response. Something inside me quietly snapped. I finished my meal in complete silence, politely thanked them, and left before dessert was served. On the long, dark drive back up the canyon, I made a decision. No more contact, no more trying to justify myself, no more wasting energy on people who were actively rooting for my failure. From that night forward, I poured every ounce of my being into Summit Geo Solutions. No more family updates, no holiday visits, no explanations. The isolation, once a source of pain, became a tool. It sharpened my focus like nothing else ever could. The turning point, when it finally came, arrived not with a bang, but a whisper. A small, unglamorous contract with the Colorado Division of Wildlife to monitor habitat changes along a river corridor. It wasn't much, but it was just enough revenue to hire my first full-time developer and rent a modest office space in a cheaper part of downtown. Together, we refined the platform, integrating more accurate LiDAR data for elevation modeling and partnering with local universities to get the independent validation studies I so desperately needed. Word began to spread within state agency circles. Soon, we secured pilot projects with the Colorado Department of Natural Resources, tracking the environmental impact of recreation on public lands near Moab and other high-traffic areas. These projects were crucial. They proved our system's reliability. We provided real-time alerts on trail erosion, shifts in water quality from runoff, and even detected illegal off-road vehicle activity using satellite cross-checks. Our revenue grew, slowly but steadily. I expanded the team to 8 people and upgraded our servers for faster data processing. It was during this phase that I married David. We had a quiet, simple ceremony in the mountains with only a few close colleagues present. From that day on, I began using my married name, Hayes, for all professional matters, press releases, conference panels, and award submissions. It wasn't about hiding, it was about creating a clear, clean separation from the Miller name, which still carried so much weight in the traditional real estate and development networks my father dominated. Interviews in local tech journals referred to me as Sarah Hayes, CEO of Summit Geo Solutions, and no one ever made the connection back to the family I had left behind. The big breakthrough came after years of relentless proposal revisions and countless demonstrations at federal workshops. Summit Geo Solutions was awarded a $120 million multi-year contract with the Bureau of Land Management to deploy our AI monitoring system across mountain resource zones nationwide. The scope was immense. It involved installing vast sensor networks, integrating with existing government databases, and providing real-time dashboards for federal decision-makers on everything from water rights to wildfire risk mitigation. The media coverage was immediate and intense. A feature in a major business magazine highlighted how a Colorado-based startup was revolutionizing public land stewardship. National outlets picked up the story, praising our innovative use of machine learning for conservation. I found myself speaking at industry events under my married name, accepting awards on stage as Sarah Hayes, and watching my company's valuations soar. Across town in the opulent Miller family home, Ashley overheard my father complaining during a dinner conversation about a new federal contractor. He grumbled that some of his pending development deals were being complicated by new requirements for advanced environmental monitoring from a vendor named Summit Geo Solutions, led by some Hayes woman. Ashley noted the name. Later that night, alone in her room, she began searching public contract databases, a habit she had developed to stay ahead of industry trends. The BLM Award announcement for Summit Geo Solutions popped up immediately, with CEO Sarah Hayes listed at the top. Cross-referencing company founding documents and old news clippings took her only a few minutes. The realization must have hit her like a physical blow. This was her sister's little project, built from absolutely nothing into a major federal contractor that was now directly impacting and even outshining their family's legacy operations. Over the following weeks, that shock curdled into a deep, bitter resentment. Ashley saw headlines celebrating the innovative woman who was reshaping resource management, while her own role remained tied to her father's aging business model. Her position as the heir apparent suddenly felt fragile. His partners began asking about adopting similar tech solutions to remain competitive. She started planting seeds of doubt at family dinners, suggesting my success was a fluke, that federal contracts were notoriously fragile and often overhyped. My mother listened with sympathetic concern. My father grumbled about disruptive upstarts. It was Ashley who proposed a solution, framing it as a compassionate family intervention. She reminded them of the $1.5 million they had once discussed transferring through her account years ago, a sum intended as potential early backing for me that was never actually sent. She argued that this non-existent transaction could be positioned as an unpaid loan, now that my company was clearly solvent. Convincing them didn't take much. The narrative she spun fit perfectly with their long-held belief that I was reckless and that they needed to save me from my own inevitable collapse. Ashley took charge, finding a lawyer willing to file a suit based on this alleged debt, and she began fabricating records to support their claim. The plan was insidious: file for bankruptcy protection on behalf of the creditor, triggering an investigation that would delay or even derail the BLM rollout before anyone realized the true scale of my company's financial stability. A thick envelope from the federal court arrived at my office one morning, stamped URGENT. I sliced it open at my desk, expecting some routine compliance paperwork. Instead, I was looking at a bankruptcy petition filed against Summit Geo Solutions. It claimed my company was insolvent and owed $1.5 million to a creditor who had invested early on and had never been repaid. The creditor was listed as Ashley Miller. My stomach plunged. I read her name twice, then scanned the attached documents. A supposed loan agreement dated years back with a signature that looked vaguely like a poor imitation of mine, and financial statements showing massive, fabricated losses. It was a complete work of fiction, alleging a family-backed investment routed through Ashley's account was now in default. The initial shock was quickly replaced by a cold wave of disbelief. My own sister had gone this far. I had built everything without a single cent from them, and here was a fraudulent claim designed to force me into court and halt my company's most critical operations. I called Jessica Vance immediately. She had handled all our federal contract compliance and knew our finances inside and out. I scanned and emailed her the entire filing while we were still on the phone. Her voice remained professional, but I could hear the sharp edge of concern as she reviewed the documents. "This is blatant fraud, Sarah," she said finally. "Forged signatures, invented account numbers, timelines that don't match any real transactions. We can dismantle this with our audited statements and bank records alone." She paused for a moment. "But here's the danger. The petition itself creates a problem. Even if it's dismissed quickly, the filing is a matter of public record. It could trigger reviews from our BLM partners, delay funding disbursements, or scare off private investors. And if the judge has any local ties to established families like yours, they might drag this out just for appearances." Her warning landed heavily. Denver's business community was tight-knit. Old money and judicial appointments often overlapped. A prolonged case could stall our nationwide rollout at the worst possible moment. I drove home early that day, my mind racing. David was in the kitchen and knew something was wrong the moment I walked in. I handed him the papers without a word. He read them in silence, his expression hardening with each page. "This is insane," he said, his voice low and tight. "Your own sister. After everything you built, all on your own." We sat at the kitchen table late into the night, talking it all through. The betrayal was what stung the most, Ashley positioning herself as the victim, using our shared history as a weapon. David, ever the pragmatist, worried about the immediate fallout. Sensor deployments scheduled in 3 different states, new hires starting, grant milestones that were due. Any hold on our payments could force layoffs and damage the credibility we had fought for years to earn. We agreed on one thing: we would fight back aggressively. Over the next few days, Jessica and her team assembled a comprehensive response. We brought in a Big Four accounting firm to provide fully audited financials, which showed healthy reserves and consistent revenue growth. We hired a forensic handwriting expert who concluded that the signatures on the petition were unequivocally forged. We pulled bank records from every account I had ever held, personal and corporate, proving that no transfer matching the claimed amount or timing had ever occurred. David helped me organize detailed timelines, digging up old emails and tax filings to establish that I had never accepted any family money after leaving home. We even prepared sworn affidavits from my earliest team members, confirming the company's self-funded origins. The court date loomed. On the morning of the hearing, I arrived at the federal building with boxes of our evidence. Jessica walked beside me, exuding a quiet confidence that was deeply reassuring. Across the aisle, my family arrived as a coordinated unit. Ashley led the way, dressed in a sharp business suit, giving her lawyer quiet instructions with confident nods. My mother wore a somber, dark dress, her expression carefully arranged into one of pained disappointment. My father sat bolt upright, projecting the image of a patriarch forced to deal with a wayward child's mess. The session began. Ashley's attorney rose, his voice filling the room as he painted a picture of my irresponsible mismanagement and an unpaid family loan that was now jeopardizing his client's financial future. He spoke of the generous support that had been ignored, despite repeated requests for repayment. I watched their performance, my pulse steady, but a cold anger simmered just beneath the surface. Jessica remained composed, patiently waiting for her turn. The bailiff called the session to order. Judge Henderson entered and took the bench. Ashley's attorney immediately stood. "Your Honor, my client, Ms. Ashley Miller, seeks immediate bankruptcy protection for Summit Geo Solutions. The company is insolvent and has defaulted on a $1.5 million loan advanced years ago. The creditor has suffered significant financial harm." He gestured dramatically towards a stack of documents. "We have loan agreements, promissory notes, and correspondence proving the debt was acknowledged, but never repaid." At the mention of financial harm, my mother let out a small, well-timed sob. My father gave a slow, solemn nod. Ashley stared straight ahead, her lips pressed into a thin line of righteous certainty. When he finally sat down, Judge Henderson leaned forward. "Counsel for the respondent?" Jessica rose smoothly. "Your Honor, we have filed a comprehensive motion to dismiss this case with prejudice. Before we proceed, I ask that the court review the supplemental asset and tax records we submitted last night." The judge nodded to the clerk. A few tense minutes passed as he flipped through the new documents. The room grew silent. Then he stopped, removed his glasses, and looked directly at my family's table. "I've reviewed the asset and tax records. Someone in this courtroom is lying to my face." Ashley's shoulders went rigid. My mother's tissue froze in mid-dab. My father's jaw tightened. Jessica stepped forward. "Your Honor, we have 3 core pieces of evidence that prove this petition is entirely fraudulent." She projected the first exhibit onto the courtroom screens. The signatures on the alleged loan documents are forgeries. A forensic analysis by a certified examiner shows clear discrepancies in stroke patterns. pressure and flow. Every single signature was faked. She clicked to the next slide. The claimed date of the investment falls during Ms. Ashley Miller's sophomore year of college. Her bank records from that entire period show no outgoing transfers of that magnitude, nor are there any corresponding deposits into Summit Geo Solutions or any of Ms. Hayes' personal accounts. One final click. And finally, Your Honor, the bank account number listed on the petition as having received the funds has never existed. It appears to have been fabricated for the sole purpose of this filing. David squeezed my hand, a silent signal of support. Ashley's face had drained of all color. Her confident posture had collapsed. My mother's sobs had ceased entirely, as if a switch had been flipped. My father stared straight ahead, his skin looking pale and papery under the courtroom lights. Judge Henderson set the documents down. "Ms. Vance, is there anything further?" Jessica simply shook her head. "That is the essence of it, Your Honor. This petition contains no legitimate debt, no real investment, and no basis whatsoever for bankruptcy relief. We ask the court to dismiss it with prejudice and to refer this matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for investigation of bankruptcy fraud and tortious interference with a federal contractor." The judge looked across the room, his gaze finally settling on Ashley's table. The court finds this petition to be without merit and based on fabricated evidence. This case is dismissed with prejudice. The clerk is hereby directed to forward all materials to the U.S. Attorney's Office for appropriate action. This court will not tolerate attempts to misuse bankruptcy proceedings to perpetrate fraud. The gavel came down with a sharp, final crack. Ashley sat frozen, her eyes wide with shock. My mother just stared at the floor. My father's hands were gripping the edge of the table, his knuckles bone white. Jessica turned to me and gave a small, relieved nod. The real consequences were only just beginning. Federal investigators moved with terrifying speed. Agents interviewed Ashley's lawyer, laying out the mountain of evidence against him and the very real possibility of disbarment. Facing the end of his career, he quickly cooperated, turning over a trove of emails, draft documents, and even recordings of meetings where Ashley had laid out the entire scheme, framing it as a necessary measure to protect the family from my supposed failure. The full ugly picture emerged. Ashley had orchestrated everything. The plea deal her attorneys negotiated was her only way to avoid a lengthy prison sentence. She was convicted of a federal felony, a permanent mark that would follow her for the rest of her life. She was hit with substantial fines that wiped out her personal savings and was ordered to pay restitution. But for her, the most devastating blow came from our father. He formally revised his entire estate plan and all company succession documents, completely removing her from any executive role or significant inheritance. Her status as the golden child had vanished overnight. The scandal bled over into the family business. News of the fraud case ripped through Denver's tight-knit real estate community. Major clients and developers demanded audits of their partnerships with the Miller Development Group. Several key partners pulled out entirely, citing the reputational risk. Banks tightened their credit lines. My father, suddenly looking years older, worked tirelessly to stop the bleeding, but the damage was done. A major joint venture for a new luxury resort collapsed when their partners invoked a morality clause in their contract. Revenue plummeted. With no viable path to recovery, my father eventually sold the company to a larger regional competitor for a fraction of its former value. The Miller name, once a symbol of power in the Rockies, was now a cautionary tale. About 8 months after the sentencing, a letter from my mother arrived. It was handwritten on her heavy, cream-colored stationery, 12 pages of self-serving justifications. She wrote of her deep concern for my well-being, her fear that the tech world would chew me up and spit me out, and how Ashley had convinced them that this drastic intervention was the only way to bring me back into the family fold. The pages were filled with phrases like, "We only ever wanted what was best for you, and family should stick together." There was no real apology, just a deep-seated regret that things had escalated so publicly. I read it once, folded it, and set it aside without ever replying. The final, unavoidable confrontation happened in a sterile courthouse hallway after Ashley's sentencing was confirmed. My family was huddled together on a bench, speaking in hushed, defeated tones. Ashley looked small and broken, her eyes fixed on the floor. My mother clutched a wad of tissues. My father stood with his shoulders slumped. I walked toward them, with David at my side. They all looked up as I stopped a few feet away. Robert, Margaret, Ashley. The formal use of their names hung in the air. My mother flinched. My father met my gaze for a brief second before looking away. "I trust you all understand the roles you played in this," I said, my voice steady and even. "The fraud, the lies, the attempt to destroy everything I built." My father started to speak. "Sarah, it was mostly—" I cut him off. "Don't. Ashley may have led it, but you enabled her. You chose to believe I would fail, rather than ever admit you might have been wrong about me." My mother whispered, "We thought we were protecting you." "Protection," I replied, my voice cold, "does not involve forged documents and perjury in federal court. The consequences you are all facing now are yours and yours alone." Ashley finally looked up, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't think it would go this far." "But it did," I said softly, "and I'm done." I turned to leave, then paused for one last look. "Don't contact me again. Don't reach out to David or to anyone at my company. As of this moment, we are no longer family." No one said a word as we walked away. That hallway was the end. No more invitations, no more letters, no more pretense. In the years that followed, Summit Geo Solutions expanded steadily. We opened new offices in Boise and Sacramento to support our field teams. Our staff grew to over 200 engineers, data scientists, and policy experts, all drawn to our mission. Follow-on contracts with the BLM and other federal agencies rolled in, totaling billions over the next decade. David and I designed and built our own home, a modern house nestled in the hills above Boulder with vast windows that framed the mountain peaks. We moved in just before our daughter, Emma, was born. Life settled into a new, wonderful rhythm of board meetings, family dinners, and quiet evenings watching the sunset from our deck. I often found myself in the nursery at dusk, holding Emma, rocking her gently as she drifted off to sleep. The room smelled of baby lotion and clean laundry. One evening, as her tiny hand gripped my finger with surprising strength, I found myself whispering stories to her, not fairy tales, but truths. "You're going to try things that scare you," I told her softly. "And some people might tell you it's impossible. But the people who truly matter will be there to cheer you on for every single step, especially the stumbles." She cooed in her sleep, and I thought about our team celebrations, the late nights that turned into laughter over pizza, the text messages of congratulations at all hours from colleagues who genuinely cared. Those were the people I had chosen to be our family. I never heard from the Millers again. No cards, no calls. The silence was absolute, and I was grateful for it. Emma would never know the crushing weight of conditional approval or the sharp sting of favoritism. Her world would be one of encouragement, a place where she was free to explore, to fail and to try again, always backed by unwavering support. I placed her gently in her crib, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. This child would grow up believing her ideas had value simply because they were hers. She would learn that real family celebrates your wins without jealousy and stands by you through every setback. That is the legacy I built, not from old money or an inherited name, but from sheer persistence and the freedom to choose who belongs in your life. They tried to prove I was the failure they always said I would be. Instead, they only proved the cost of their own bitterness. While their world shrank, mine expanded, proving that true strength is not the legacy you are given, but the one you build for yourself. End of story.